Welcome to the Therapy Show. I'm Lisa Mustard, your host and guide on this journey of learning and professional growth. Here, we transform the way you earn continuing education contact hours. Whether you're on a walk, on a break in between sessions, commuting, or even preparing dinner, you can engage with cutting-edge insights from leading subject matter experts. Each episode features conversations with seasoned professionals who share effective techniques and tools tailored for busy therapists like you. Our goal is to enrich your practice and fit seamlessly into your active life, ensuring you stay informed and inspired without the hassle of traditional methods. You can say goodbye to sitting in front of a computer screen watching hours and hours of recorded trainings. Instead, we make continuing education as easy and accessible as your favorite podcast. So make sure to visit the website, lisamustard.com, to sign up for our continuing education membership. It's a fantastic way to earn your credits while enjoying the podcast. Join us on the Therapy Show, where your professional development continues wherever you are. Please note that the content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional mental health care, diagnose, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your own licensed mental health provider or medical professional regarding your specific situation. While I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and my guests are also professional counselors, the discussions in this podcast are meant to offer general insights and should not be taken as personalized therapeutic advice. Listening to this podcast does not establish a therapist-client relationship with me or any of my guests. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis or have thoughts of harming yourself or others, please contact a mental health professional, call 911, or go to the nearest emergency room immediately. You can also reach out to a crisis hotline such as the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988 in the United States for immediate support. Every individual's journey is unique, and what works for one person may not be suitable for another, so please use discretion and seek appropriate care as needed. Are you tired of sitting in front of the computer to watch hours and hours and hours of recorded trainings so you can get your continuing education requirements fulfilled? Look, I was, and I decided to do something about it. I have created convenient on-the-go learning that's completely audio-based. I call them pod courses. Well, what's a pod course? Think of it as a hybrid between a captivating podcast and a self-study course tailored for you, my perpetually busy counselor friend. In my pod courses, you can explore subjects like addiction issues, ethics and values in counseling, holistic approaches, and much more, all while you're on the move. Whether you're commuting, jogging, relaxing at home, whatever, pod courses blend your favorite podcasts with enriching self-study courses, perfect for those always on the go. How it works. So tune in anywhere, anytime. Enjoy the pod courses on any device wherever podcasts are available. Quiz yourself, solidify your understanding with a brief quiz after each pod course. Then, last but not least, certify your smarts. Achieve a score of at least 80% to receive a certificate of completion. If you're curious to learn more about my pod course offerings, head to the link lisamustard.com/pod courses or just click the link in the show notes. Pod courses are brought to you with pride by Mustard Consulting LLC, your trusted NBCC ACEP provider. Well, hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of The Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard, and I'm excited and thrilled to have Dr. Joshua Coleman join me on the podcast this week. Welcome. It's so great to have you.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, so I want to just jump right into it and ask, what led you to specialize in family estrangement?
Well, it was really personal experience. I have an adult daughter who I'm very close to and was when she was younger, but there was a period of time I was married and divorced in my 20s, and there was a period of time after I became remarried and where she and had children from my second marriage, which is, my current marriage,
Mhm.
of many years, where she felt kind of displaced, pushed to the side, not as important. And when she went to talk to me about that, probably in her early 20s, and I think I was more defensive and sensitive and really wasn't kind of able to give her the sort of validation and hearing that I think she really needed and wanted. And as a result, she became more sort of frustrated and fed up and then eventually just stopped talking to me for close to, it's hard to remember exactly because that was probably, almost 40 years ago, but yeah, but, probably, 2 years or more. So it was pretty bad.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I can only imagine that just stinks. And this whole topic just
it's so fascinating to me. I don't see a lot of therapists out there talking about family estrangement. So from there, did you just kind of dive into it, and how did that play out?
Yeah, well, at the time, I was in therapy with a really good kind of semi-famous psychoanalyst, and the advice he gave me was terrible. Much like the advice, the well-meaning advice that I hear other therapists giving in this space. It just made things worse. And so when we did reconcile, you know, I realized that there was a big need for people to have a certain kind of guidance around this topic that just wasn't out there.
Yeah.
And some of it came through my own personal experience, which was kind of centered around, just being focused much more on the child's reality and taking responsibility and showing empathy and not being defensive and explaining away their experience. But others was based, particularly in my second book. So I wrote my first book in 2007, and as When Parents Hurt, as a result of that, got a wide following of parents here and in other countries. And from that, developed a wide following of parents and started doing a webinar series and Q&A. And so from that, did some research studies on the topic and developed my more recent book, Rules of Estrangement, based on, kind of everything I've learned from literally the thousands of parents and families, not just parents, but adult children that I've been engaging with for the past, I don't know how many years has it been, 18 years at this point.
Okay. So how have do you think attitudes towards family estrangement shifted over like 20 years or so? Because I'll be on so I am 51, so I'm Gen X. And so I look at my mom and dad a certain way through a certain lens, right? So I'm
Yeah.
wondering if how that shifted or what you've noticed.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's been a big shift in the past half century in terms of kind of the moral framework that's guided families for millennia, really up until the 1960s or so. The dynamic of families was, honor thy mother and thy father, respect thy elders, families forever. And that gradually gave way to this much more kind of individualistic orientation towards protecting my mental health, my self-esteem, my happiness, my personal growth. And today that is the dominant narrative for younger generations. A story that I often tell when I'm giving workshops about this is working with a 24-year-old daughter and her mother, and the daughter saying to the mother, "Well, mom, when you were my age, did you call grandma because you wanted to or because you felt like it was the right thing to do?" And the mother said, "Well, as you know, we weren't very close. So I called her mostly because it was the right thing to do." And the daughter said, "Yeah, I don't want that kind of relationship with you." And I said, "Well, what kind would you like?" The daughter said, "If I want to call her, I'll call her. If I don't want to call her, I'm not going to call her." So these kinds of engagements that in the past were considered to be being more dutiful, showing your responsibility towards the others, filial obligation. That's all given way to this much more personalized, individualistic perspective. And and it's a good news, bad news thing. In the same way that people aren't obligated to stay in bad marriages with abusive spouses, people aren't also obligated to stay connected to parents who are abusive. But even there, it becomes kind of slippery because what we're calling abusive behavior has also radically changed, where we kind of lowered the threshold for what we will label, particularly emotional abuse or trauma or harm or neglect. All that's become much more, the threshold for that has become much lower. So you see this big generational difference in terms of how older generations, say boomers, or maybe to a certain extent Gen Xers, talk about abuse and trauma and neglect, and younger generations like, Gen Z and millennials talk about it. And that's often where these fights begin.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm Gen X. We have 2 daughters, 16 and almost 14, and the way that I respond and react to some of the things sometimes that they say versus how my mom reacted and responded to I see a difference.
Yeah.
My mom just blew it off, whatever.
Right.
My when I said something and when I say something, my kid's just like, "Oh," sometimes it's very I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, okay," I have to take a different approach with certain topics, but we talk about it. We talk about it. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of my biggest fears is my kids are gonna grow up one day and say they don't want anything to do with me.
I
So,
think it's a common fear.
yeah. Yeah. And I I mean, I guess we could probably theorize why that is, and I know you've already said a couple things about why that might be, but do you think social media and getting clips of information in 10-second bursts and things being taken out of context is an issue? I think it's
I
kind of a
think
s
social media is a huge problem. And I think people in our field are a huge problem. I think
Yeah.
I really do. I mean, if we just look at social media, there's Instagram influencers about why you should go no contact, 10 steps to prove that your mother's a borderline or a
Mhm.
narcissist, and all the values of going no contact. And most common letter I see from adult children is, it's not good for my mental health. And my therapist says that you're a narcissist, so I shouldn't do family therapy with you, even though the parent actually isn't a narcissist.
Right.
But there's just enormous support for this idea. And it's sort of wedded to our kind of more American and highly individualistic idea that your identity and your own personal happiness and your personal perspective is the most important thing. And so therapists have become, and social media influencers have become what the sociologist Alison Pugh refers to as detachment brokers. They sort of help people to detach more from the obligatory relationships or feelings of, responsibility or duty, even guilt, or even care that prior generations just, and in other cultures just still assume is right. Prior generations, would assume is just part of being a family member. So yeah, I think degenerate therapists have become kind of the new high priest, basically telling you who it's okay to stay close to and who you shouldn't. And I think it's a problem.
I do. I agree with you. I do think it's a problem. I
Yeah.
I I really believe it's a problem. So what advice do you have for therapists who actually want to help families reconcile or help children understand maybe their parents' perspective or so where I guess I just have all these questions. How do you help therapists help this population?
Yeah, no, it's an important question. I mean, there's a bunch of different things I think for a therapist to consider. One is that, I don't think a parent should ever say, I did the best that I could, because it sounds dismissive. It sounds like, so give me a break, right? The parent, it doesn't land anywhere if the adult child is complaining about feeling hurt or neglected or even harmed. But I think for as therapists, we do have to have the orientation that parents do the best that they could, even when their best was terrible, because we're all sort of products of our genetics and our own family traumas, our own family histories, our social class, what parenting pedagogy was, popular at the time. And so helping the client develop a certain degree of compassion for the parent while not sacrificing their own self-compassion. I
Okay.
think that's sort of the dilemma for most of us when we're working with somebody. So we don't want to sound like, oh, you're a poor parent. Think about what it feels like to be them, because really our client is the person who's sitting in front of us. So, but I think it's actually therapeutic to help people to not personalize as deeply their parents' behavior, because it helps them to detach from it and not feel as much like it's about them. So I think that's important. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about clients I've had in the past when this was something they would say, like, "I don't wanna have a relationship with my parent," or and I would ask questions about, "Well, tell me what was going on in that your parents' life when you were 15 years old. What were they experiencing?" So you're kinda trying to get an understanding of the context and the relationship, and I think that's so important, and if we
Agreed.
as therapists, if we don't talk about that, we're doing our client a disservice, especially if we just say something like, "Oh, yeah, your mom is definitely a narcissist, and, yeah,
Right.
cut her off. Just cut her off. She doesn't, she doesn't deserve your love," or whatever they're saying these
Exactly.
days.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. What
Yeah,
else would you yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I think that's really, really an important perspective to bring in the context of the parent's behavior. If for no other reason, it actually will help the client not to personalize it. Because some of the reasons that our clients feel so upset or so mad or so hurt is that they feel like it was something about them that caused the parent to behave in the hurtful, traumatizing way, when it was really more the parents' kind of liabilities and their own, inabilities to be able to see their child with clarity and not as some kind of a projection of their own childhood wounds, etc. The other thing I think is important, for we as therapists to think about is kind of, even if it's in the short term, better for our clients to cut off a parent. Estrangements are a cataclysmic event in a family. Typically, if an adult child cuts off a parent, they also cut off access to the grandchildren. Siblings are going to ally either with the estranging adult child or the parents. In marriages, if the parents are still together, it can cause enormous conflict because there's often differences in whether people want to, typically dads don't want to try as hard and moms want to keep trying no matter what. So I think we have to think about kind of the child is part of a family system and how it's going to impact their relationships with other people in the family. Does it mean you're going to generate so much conflict with your brother or sister or cousins or other people? How's it going to be for your children? Because there's a lot of people who were kind of crappy parents who are actually great as grandparents, and that's a value to children. And it's also gives the parent an opportunity to be a better, to heal some of the ways that they weren't good parents. So I think the opportunities for healing in a variety of ways are really important to think about. And third, in the same way as part of my work, I'll reach out to the estranged adult child to see if they'll talk to me and give me their perspective. I think therapists don't often enough offer to reach out to the parents and see if a better conversation can be made. Because I think a lot of parents who are sort of being cast as being completely unworkable and unrepentant, actually, if given the right set of tools and communication tools, which many don't have, they can do a better
Mm.
job. I mean, much of my work is helping parents learn how to sort of communicate in this much more kind of psychological way that is so popular now. That wasn't popular when they were growing up.
Oh, yeah. No, that's really interesting. So how do you help the what does that look like, I guess? How do you help them repair?
The parent,
Mhm, yes.
yeah. Well, what I tell parents is you have to find the kernel, if not the bushel, of truth in your child's complaints. So, and this is where it's tricky. I don't know if you've heard this study by Nick Haslam. He's the Australian psychologist who developed that. He said there's been a concept creep over the past 3 decades. The right article was in 2016, but it's still true over what we consider to be harmful, abusive, neglectful, or traumatizing behavior. So younger generations are looking at all of those things with this much lower threshold than parents looked at. And that's, if you just look at the DSM, what we consider to be any of those things, it's become much more expansive. It's easier to get diagnosed with any of those things. And there's, been this flurry of new diagnoses. So adult children can come into the parent's house and say, well, you have and this, and it's in the DSM, and my therapist agrees with me. And so therapists are often, parents are often call it, caught flat-footed in terms of knowing how to respond. So particularly the concept of emotional abuse, which wasn't nearly as popular 3 or 4 decades ago. So what I tell parents is if they don't feel like they were emotionally abusive, and frankly, most don't, some do, some acknowledge it.
Mm.
But it's to say something like, well, it's clear that I have significant blind spots as a person or as a parent that I wasn't aware that felt emotionally abusive to you. But I'm glad that you're letting me know. And would you be open to doing some family therapy around it? Or is this something you'd be would like me to work on in my own therapy, or if we spend time together, can you let me know the next time that I do it? Or what other memories do you have to actually go, because the natural human parental response is, no, what are you talking about? Your therapist is a quack. I didn't abuse you. You had a child that I would have killed for, right? I mean, that's sort of the
Right.
natural parental response, which is just the opposite of what the child is really wanting. They're
Mm.
really wanting to feel seen and heard and cared about and understood. So the parent has to show that they're able and willing to, quote, do the work, is such a common phrase these days. And that opens the door potentially. But, as I'm in pains to say to all the strange parents in my practices, you can do everything perfect and your kid may still not open the door. There's a lot of reasons why an adult child may not be ready to reconcile, even for the parent who's the most workable, either because they just still feel too hurt about the past and mistrustful, A, or B, they're married to somebody who says, choose them or me. You can't have both, not uncommon. They're mentally ill. I mean, the parent could be mentally ill, but so could the adult child. Their therapist is alleging traumas where no traumas existed. They don't know any other way to feel separate than to cut off the parent. And lastly, because of divorce, I mean, divorce is a huge cause of estrangement, enormous cause of estrangement for a bunch of different reasons. So for all those reasons, I think our job is to give the parent the best practices, but it still doesn't mean that their adult child, if they're estranged, is going to open the door.
Right, and you just listed off all of the different reasons why a child might be so as a therapist, I'm like, "Whoa, this is great for me to work with my clients, like, let's find out if any of this is going on," because it's not like I mean, I have a really hard time believing that a adult child will wake up one day and say, "I'm just gonna cut off contact with my parents." It
Sure.
just feels like the right thing to do today. It just seems like there would be other reasons or
Oh, for
reasons
sure.
why it would be coming up for them, and I
That's true.
wonder if there's other things along the way that the parent that you're working with might say, "Yeah, now that I look back on it, there was this time and this, so I can understand." It's just a process, I guess, for both parties. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think parents have to do that sort of regardless of what brought the child to the estrangement. Like,
Mhm.
so let's say, I don't think it's super uncommon for a now adult child who is growing up to have had significant psychological challenges. Let's say they had learning disabilities, they had ADD. In addition to that, they had significant psychiatric issues, which caused the parent to send them away to venture camp or even a therapeutic boarding school. And from the parents' perspective, they spend lots of money on psychiatrists and psychologists and got tons of consultation. really to try to keep the kid alive or give them some of an avenue into adulthood. And the child looks back and says, well, I didn't need any of that. That was all about you and your narcissistic needs to have a perfect family. And if you just left me alone, I would have been fine. Now, from the parent's perspective, and even my perspective as a psychologist, I might say, well, that's not actually true. Well, but the parent, if they really want to empathize with the child, they always have to sort of maintain the possibility that it could be true in order to help the child preserve their own sense of kind of, integrity and selfhood and as a defense against their own feelings of shame. So I think it's useful for parents to say, well, maybe you're right about that. At the time, we did think we were doing what was right for you, but I could see how you could have wished that we could have found a better or a different way to do it. And I could see how that would have felt, how that really could have felt like we didn't really trust your ability to figure things out on your own without saying, actually, we didn't trust your ability. I mean, they could say that, but then they also have to accept the child's version. But, but maybe you're right. Maybe it would have been better off. And I'm sorry. Right. So, I mean, the goal is to find a way to be on the same page as the adult child, but parents don't have to cede their own reality. They don't have to say, yes, you're right. I was a terrible, narcissistic, neglectful parent. I mean, if they really were, then they probably should say it. But
Right.
but most of the time, the parent has their own perspective about why they made the decisions that they did.
Yeah, interesting. I was just thinking about this the other day, and I had an interview with a colleague talking about mental health therapy and counseling for children and how important it is for parents to play a role in that. And I'm a marriage and family therapist by training. And I've always said, like, if my kid ever needs to go to therapy, it's going to be family therapy because I realize as the parent, I play a role in this somehow. So if there was, I guess I'm asking, like, if you give advice to families today who are worried about this in the future, I guess I'm wondering, would you agree with me that it would be wise if you are having issues in the family, go to family therapy. Don't just send the kid to therapy because of y'all, I'm using air quotes, crazy therapists out there who want to pathologize the parent and just validate everything that this young child is feeling and not, okay, so you're nodding your head and you agree.
No, I 100% agree with
Okay.
you. I
Yeah.
think particularly with divorce and if there's potential for alienation, sometimes people say, well, let's get the kid in therapy. Well, it's like, the kid is going to be influenced by the therapist who has their own ideas. Unless the therapist is really trained in parental alienation, they may not know that the child is being kind of coercively influenced by one parent over the other. And it just sort of strengthens that view rather than something that really, helps the parents to do a better job or to heal whatever is causing the distance. So, I completely agree with you. I mean, unless you really know the therapist. I mean, I can think of some therapists where, my kids are all grown, but when they were younger, who I would have probably felt some confidence in referring to because I know that they would have still done consultations with me even while they were seeing my kid or my teen. And even if my teen didn't give them permission, they'd probably still give me enough indication of what was going on.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like I was completely, set adrift. Or they would even say something like, well, I'm going to have to ally with your child for a while about this. So if they come home saying, well, the doctor agrees with me, then, just know that I'm not sacrificing your perspective. I'm still keeping that in mind, but this is what they need right now. So,
Yeah.
so I can imagine a situation where, but it's still, to your point, a form of collaborative therapy, right? Where the parent isn't just left out in the woods, to kind of to be a potential victim to the
Mhm.
child's and the therapist's perspective.
Yeah, I do think unfortunately nowadays parents are of the mindset for some reason that the therapist is just gonna fix my kid and they'll just come home and, outsourcing that
Right.
that part, and that just breaks my heart. I don't know. I really don't. That's my own thing. I don't understand that, but that's my own wounded child probably coming out, right? Okay. So if therapists out there, I believe you have a course, right, on how to work with estranged families, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So what
It's
does
a
that look like?
It's an online course. Yeah, it's a 6-hour course where therapists can get CEs, and I talk about all the different pathways to estrangement, kind of like what we were just talking about:
Mhm.
divorce, troubled son-in-law, or daughter-in-law, mental illness, abuse on the parent's part, problematic therapy, or just kids who just need to feel separate from the parent. And then kind of how to help the parents write a letter of amends. A big part of my strategy is helping parents write a letter that takes responsibility and finds the kernel, if not the bushel of truth. How to help the, how to help adult children approach their parents in a way that maximizes the probability of a positive response instead of saying, "Well, my therapist says you're a narcissist. to say, well, there are things about my childhood that I really value and like, but there are things that were more hurtful that I would really like you to understand. Something that sets the stage for a productive conversation. And I talk a lot about the cultural changes that we talked about earlier in the hour and the research, the statistics about estrangement. So it's fairly comprehensive.
Yeah, sounds like a really wonderful I looked at it and I was thinking, maybe I should hop in there. And is this a specialty or a niche that you think therapists could really hone in on these days? Do you feel like it's a popular reason people are coming to okay.
I do. Yeah. Every therapist I talk to says that there are many more referrals for this than they've ever seen. So that's why I think it's a silent epidemic. It's silent
Mhm.
because the estranged parents aren't really talking about it because they're too ashamed, basically. But adult children are talking about it more. So it's very much in the media.
Yeah, and they're putting it on TikTok and
Right.
Instagram and telling you all about why you
Right.
should
Definitely
why you
are.
should cut off your parents. What about the flip side of things? Do you work with adult children whose parents have cut off contact?
I do. Yeah. And
Mm,
to me, those are more tragic in a certain way because I feel like, gosh, if you're as parents, I have so many parents in my practice who would kill to be in your situation of wanting to reconcile with your child. It's typically for religious reasons, or it's because they're so antagonistic to the child's gender identity or sexuality that that they just can't accept it. I think those are tragic
mhm.
situations. So
Do
in
you
those situations, I would reach out to the parent and see if a better conversation can be had. Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't.
What about the idea of that parent being persuaded by their partner, their new partner or their new wife? Would that be something too that you see?
I see that a lot with men. Men are
Okay.
very vulnerable if there's a divorce. When men remarry, they are more vulnerable. Or if a man never had biological, if the dad never married, he's much more at risk. Either if the child's mother has new children, has a new partner, men are more likely to withdraw. The mother may also be more likely to become less motivated to keep dad in their lives. But when a parents divorce, what we call gray divorces, those divorces that happen over 60, dads are much more at risk for estrangement. Kids more typically ally with mom. It's typically because moms have generally, not always, but invested more in the child. And I think moms typically have sort of a more intuitive sense about it. The dads are more vulnerable to a wife or partner who wants him to prioritize her children or their children together.
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. As I've seen some of those cases in the past, so I was just curious if that was something that was part of the reason, I guess. Okay, besides your course and your books, do you recommend any other information or trainings or publications out there for therapists to check out?
Yeah, I like the book by Carl Pillemer, who's a sociologist at Cornell. His book came out similar to same time mine did. It's called Fault Lines, and he did a large survey. His is more academically oriented, but I think it's useful for people who are studying it. I like the book Bad Therapy by Abigail Schreier. I don't know if you know that book.
Yeah, I have it.
Uh,
It's good.
do you have it? Yeah. I mean, she talks, it's more written for parents of young children, but I think it's good in terms of helping parents to kind of, reclaim their authority as parents and cede everything to the therapist. Yeah, those are a couple that come to mind right off the bat. Yeah.
Okay. What's next for you? Are you speaking anywhere, writing more books?
I have a fairly regular column in the Washington Post in the Ask a Therapist column, so I'll have an article coming out on Valentine's Day about the right and wrong way to complain. So,
I like that.
yeah, very important for anybody who's in a relationship. Um,
Yeah.
And I had a flurry of podcast interviews over the past month. I was on The Economist and Apple News and CNN with Audie Cornish and interviewed at The Guardian in the UK and the Times of London. And just trying to think if there's anything else coming. The BBC is going to have an article coming out. So it's a hot topic right now. People are really wanting to get educated and informed about it. And there's very strong feelings on both sides of the aisle. But parents have really strong feelings, and the adult children who are estranged have really strong feelings. So it's almost like a political divide in terms of the kind of hostility or hurt or anger that kind of comes from both sides. So
Yeah, what do you think it's gonna take culturally to shift this?
well, I don't know
Yeah.
exactly. I'm kind of hopeful that
Yeah.
over time people can see the promises of individualism don't necessarily pan out in the way the sort of preoccupation with happiness and mental health. Does it really make us happier and mentally healthier? I would argue no. That I think that we, even with parents who didn't do a great job, I do feel like we sort of still owe them something because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. That doesn't mean they get to set the terms and can continue to be abusive, but if they're open to working on themselves or repairing or taking amends or modifying their behavior, I think that's a deal that I wish more people would take. So I just think there has to be a shift in the narrative away from this preoccupation with happiness and borders and limits and boundaries, and more towards more towards a more collaborative, interactive, compassionate model of family.
Right, because families are what drive us humans forward. I mean that's what I believe.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a really important topic. And I guess I just wanna ask, what do you have advice for those therapists out there that are taking more of the, "Oh, it's just what makes you happy. That's what I was trained in," and individualism or individual I guess that's the word, individualism. What do you say to them?
Well, I mean, the research is that a preoccupation with one's own happiness actually doesn't make you happier. The research by Iris Maus, Mauss, at UC Berkeley, found that sort of the more focused you are on my own happiness and my own individual pursuits, the less happy you become because that's when you start cutting out people who are a source of meaning and pleasure and connection. In general, it's our relationships that generate the deepest feelings of resilience and happiness and meaning. So it really shouldn't just be about our own happiness, basically.
No, I agree with you. And I remember in my mid-20s when I was going through, probably I guess at the time I was probably diagnosed with depression, but I think I had just kinda come to terms with a lot of stuff in my life, and it hadn't panned out the way I thought, and I was showing the signs of sadness and hopelessness and helplessness and all those things. And going to therapy for the first time in my life thinking, how is this gonna help? I'm just gonna sit here and vent and complain. But my therapist was like, no, to get out of your depression, to get out of this, you have to do things for other people. You have to stick to a schedule. You have to put yourself out there. You have to connect with people. And that really imprinted on me at
Yeah.
my early mid-20s. And I guess that's why I became a therapist. But
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And
So important.
we have to push back, I think, and challenge our
Yeah,
clients as
we do.
therapists. We really do. And if we just let them vent and we validate, and we're not doing them any favors. Really,
No,
we're
I don't
not.
think so. No, I
Yeah.
think we get paid to hold up a mirror that
Mhm.
their friends may not hold up and,
Yeah.
to kind of show them. You can do it in a affectionate, kindly way. I don't think being
Yeah.
challenging means that you're being
You're like a
mean.
jerk. Right.
Exactly.
Like, you're not being a jerk. You're not being and
Right.
but I do think sometimes it's tough for new therapists to do that. They're
Oh,
worried
that's for
about,
sure.
but as I said, I have a variety of listeners, so I love this conversation. It's been so helpful. And where can people learn more about you, your website, all that good stuff?
Sure. Yeah. My website's www.drjoshuacoleman.com. So that's drjoshuacoleman.com. And my most recent book is Rules of Estrangement: Why Adult Children Cut Ties and How to Heal the Conflict, which you can also get from my website. And
Awesome.
I do regular webinars for parents and then every other Monday free Q&A for parents. So I have lots of free resources for parents and a free newsletter for estranged parents as well.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, Dr. Coleman, thank you so much for your time today. I've
Yeah,
just learned so much. I really appreciate
I'm
it.
so glad. Yeah, no, it was a great conversation. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Please note that the therapy show with Lisa Mustard is for informational and entertainment purposes only and not a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice. Always consult with your therapist, doctor, or physician before implementing any suggestions from the show. The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard is edited and engineered by Chelsea Weaver. If you're looking to start a podcast or ready to take the editing off of your plate, be sure to visit chelseaweaverpodcasting.com. Well, that wraps up another episode of The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine. Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover all the pod courses and other continuing education offerings. And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.